I'm Barbara Nightingale, and I'm here with Jan Beatty, and we are here to discuss anything and everything, and especially her new book, The Body Wars. And Jan is a very accomplished writer. I met her several years ago, many years ago, and she has been very prolific ever since. So she's a professor of English and a director of creative writing at Carlow University, which is in Pittsburgh.
Yes.
It's in Pittsburgh. And I am just going to jump right in and ask you, do you have a favorite poem in this book?
A favorite poem?
A favorite poem. And would you like to start with that or just the title poem?
Well, actually, that's one of the poems that I don't know about favorites, but that I'm kind of hope is a good poem, and that I think is a defining poem. So why don't I just start with that?
Okay, good. And then we'll talk.
Okay. Okay, The Body Wars. I walked into the woods bleeding. I left the town and mourned. Midnight in Alaska, still light, and I was alone, walking into the Sitka woods. It had been 1 year since I'd bled, and longer since I'd fucked anyone. I was propelled forward into the thickness, into the needles and dirt of Sitka spruce, and stupidly, not even afraid of bear. My father, the person I clung to, needed to stay alive, had died 6 months before. He was the only one who made sense in my body, and his leaving was the impossible thing. I didn't yet know my own wars and how to name them. So during my father's sickness, when I stopped bleeding, the gynecologist said, well, it's stress. And did I know that in World War II, the women paratroopers stopped having periods? I was stunned by his directness, intensity, earnestness. You are in a war, he said. I didn't know what to do with that. And so I got on a boat to Alaska, the Alaska Marine Highway, slept on the deck until I froze. Then the shipman gave me a hanging bunk and slipped me food from the cafeteria. They said, you can sleep here, but watch out for the bow thrusters. I had no idea what they meant until the sound burst open and my berth swayed, and it was time to get off. It was a time of great changes, and days later I'm wandering the woods at midnight, feeling lost and found in this northern place. And it was there I felt the blood start to move, felt a rising and falling in the stream down my leg. And I cried in the forest alone, for my beautiful father, gone too soon, for myself and all my ignorance, not even knowing my own wars, the ones already fought or the many to still come.
Just beautiful. I love that book. I got goosebumps again. When I first read it, I got goosebumps, and every time I've read it since, I got them, and I got them again when you read it. That's just a beautiful poem. When did this occur, your dad's death?
Oh, actually that was many years ago, 1986. So I was very young, well, not very young, I was in my 30s, and he died when he was 70. So, I was adopted, which comes out in my book. And so my adoptive parents were older when I was adopted. So, so they died when I was still younger. And yeah, but he was the one I was really close to. And, he was the one who died much too soon. But yeah.
Yes, it's always a loss. We all feel like orphans, no matter how old we are when our parents die.
Yeah.
It is a terrible blow. But I have to say you handled that one just beautifully in the poem. Which brings me to some of the other themes in your book. Travel seems to be, travel and loss seem to be very important in your book, and you have traveled a lot. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, part of it, is the way I write, is not right now, but usually I get on a plane and go, and I just need, have a need to go. And so I get on a plane, and as soon as I get on the plane, I can start writing, and I'm not sure what that is. And I've been driven to go west, all my life. So I usually go west, and there's a lot of west in this book, or I get on a train. And so part of it is just I'm driven to do that, but also because I teach full time, it's a way for me to just get out of town and get away from everything that I'm, that I have to do, and get away from school, get away from obligation. And I always have this feeling that when I go to a new place that, and I think this is for everybody, when you go to a new place, it wakes you up. You have to pay attention to the new rules there, like what is it, how do things work here, where is everything, what are the people like, and it wakes everything up about me. And that's a really good thing, because as a writer or as a human, you don't want to get stuck in any kind of way of being. And so right now it's been for the last 6 months, I'm like, how do I write? Because I'm not really going anywhere. So it's been interesting, it's been a different thing.
Well, maybe you could just go sit in your car and pretend and write. I think I might do that.
That's not working, but yeah, I could go for long drives, but it's interesting because I've been writing, more interior poems, and I've been writing, I have another father poem. I keep writing these father poems, and I thought like years ago I was done with that, but I keep writing these father poems, and that's okay. But so that's what's been happening.
How did the year's perspective affect that, your poem and the writing? I mean, it's been so many years. Do you discover anything new?
You mean about my writing?
Yeah, about, when you're writing about something that happened years ago, and you've written about it before, and you're writing about it again, is it different? Have you discovered new things about that time?
Well, yeah, I mean, I believe that there's usually 2 or 3 things that writers write about their whole life, and that's a good thing. They're obsessions, and hopefully as time goes on, you get better and more complex in your work. And so hopefully that's what's happened. I mean, I may be writing about my father again, and yet I'm writing about different things. For example, I'm working on a poem now about my father. Dropped out of school, high school, in 10th grade to work. And so when he was 61 years old, he went back and got his GED. And I have his diploma on my desk. And so I'm trying to write about that because it really meant a lot to him. It meant a lot to me when he did that. And truly, it's the diploma that I care about the most, not mine. That one, to me, that meant that you could dream something and make it happen. You could return to something that you had to leave and have the strength to go back. And I don't know. So I'm working on that. So it's a father poem, but it's very different. And there's plenty to write about. And hopefully my writing is improving and changing, and the craft is improving. So.
Oh, this is wonderful. I remember the first poem I heard you read was one about a train. I can't remember the title. I should have pulled that book out, but I'll never forget that one. It was really good. I just can't remember the title. I can't remember what I watched last night. I think I remember the title of the book I'm reading now. Yeah, I'm reading The Dutch House. But sometimes I don't remember. I had a question about the use of astrology in your poems. There seems to be a lot of astrology. And do you consider yourself to be a spiritualist or connected to that? Or is it just something that intrigues you?
No, I'm definitely not a spiritualist, but I do believe in astrology. I mean, I don't live by it, yet I definitely read about it. And I have an astrologer who I've had a couple of astrologers, that I go to. And, when I was in my early 20s, I went to my first astrologer, and I was having a terrible time, just in my life in my early 20s, as many people do. And
Yeah, me too.
yeah, I mean, I guess you're supposed to, but I was convinced that this astrologer was going to tell me that, okay, this is a hard time, but things are going to get better. And instead, the first thing she said to me was, she said, "Are you in therapy?" That's the first thing she said to me. And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Stay in therapy." And I said, "Oh no." And she said, you're going to have a tough time, and you're not going to have success until you're in your 40s. And this was when I was in my early 20s. And I said, "Oh no." But, it kind of was true. And, but since then, I have an astrologer now. And when I first went to her, she looked at my chart. I didn't know her. She didn't know me and had no information. And she looked at me and she said, "You have two mothers, and, I'm adopted." And I said, "Well, how do you know that?" And she said, "It's right here." And she showed me something on the chart, which made no sense to me. But there have been many things that convinced me along the way that, things can be read in these charts, and that, yes, I'm not going to run my life by them, but I'll use whatever information I can get to help myself,
Right, right. The first reading I had done by somebody, the first thing she asked me was, "Why is your husband trying to kill you?"
Oh my.
What?
That's
I said, "Well, I don't think he's physically trying to kill me. Maybe stress." It was interesting.
yeah.
That marriage did not last.
Yeah.
Yeah, those things are interesting. An interesting grammatical tool I've noticed you use are slashes within a line. And, when we're writing about poetry, we use slashes to indicate line breaks, but you've got them in the lines itself, such as the poem Speedballing, Gun Lover. Tell us why you do that. It's interesting.
Well, I mean, I first ran into slashes. I mean, poets have used them, certainly. I mean, Emily Dickinson used them, and Etheridge Knight used them a lot. Both of them are really some of my favorite poets. But I use them for different reasons in different poems. I mean, they have different effects depending on the poem and the line, etc. And when I first started using them, it was a particular story. I was at this writer's residency in Wyoming called Gentel. It's a great place if you can ever go. And it was in the middle of the night. I remember, like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was trying to write. And I was working on my shooter poem, which is in Red Sugar. And that poem is about all the abuses that women suffer at the hands of men. And for some reason, I thought it'd be a good idea to make a list of everything that ever happened to me in that vein, like all the abusive things that have happened to me. And in the middle of that, it became very intense. And I thought, because I was in the middle of nowhere. I'm like, why am I doing this? This is crazy. And so to sort of handle that psychologically, when I was writing it, I started putting vertical lines in between things just to sort of separate things and to make them, you know, seem more manageable on the page. And that was sort of the beginning. And then when I revised the poem, they sort of slanted. They, you know, I made them into slashes, slanted lines, because I felt that it controlled pacing, and it also gave more emphasis to those individual moments in the poem. So, you know, sometimes it's about speed, sometimes it's about emphasis, and depending on the poem, those slashes can speed something up or slow it down. And I don't know, I just like them because even, you know, at the end of a line, I mean, they can do things, but they're, you know, stronger than a comma, obviously not as strong as a period in terms of stopping. So it gives you another option in terms of controlling the line.
Yeah, I really like that, admired your use of it. I might steal it. I
Yeah.
would start using it myself, but it kind of, it just hit me, and it really did calm my attention, slow it down. And it also could be either or, you know, it was like, it could be this, it could be that, the slash is either or. So I found that really interesting. Another question I have here is, some of your poems are political. How important do you think it is to write political poetry? We don't really have a whole lot that I see, except poets reading the news and the daily rattle stuff. But what do you think the poet's purpose is in that?
Well, I mean, I'm old school with that. I mean, I believe, you know, I grew up in the 60s, so I believe the personal is political. I always have. And so that my writing a poem about abuse is certainly a political act. My writing, how I talk about uh, my adoption and the dark side of that, I think is a commentary on society. So I would say that all my poems are political. If you're talking about overtly political, like I have, you know, in this book, a poem about Charlottesville, you know, that kind of political. I mean, I really believe that, I mean, the role of the poet is to afflict. I mean, I go back to that quote, the role of the artist is to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. And I think that everybody needs to write whatever they want to write. I really stand by that. I see that in my classes so much, that students are oppressed by something someone has told them, like, you have to write this way, you have to portray um, people in this light, you have to write nice poems, you can't use an I in your poems, and it just strangles them. And so I think it's so important to write whatever you want to write, however you want to write it. I mean, of course, you have to pay attention to craft, you have to read, and you have to learn. And I believe that if you know, you live in the world's going to show up in your poems anyway. When I've set out to write for an anthology, or if there's a call for poems, like there have been calls for poems about the pandemic, if I try to write one of those poems, it's usually not very good, because I don't write that way. I write when, you know, I have a list of all these poems that I work on, that I probably have 85 poems that I need to write right now, and I have a list of them. And when I'm trying to sit down to write, I usually go through that list until something hits me emotionally, and I start to work on that. So everyone has their own way of writing, and I think that's great. However, anyone can do it, because, you know, it's very challenging. So whatever works is good.
That's a great idea. I never thought of that. I should do that. I just don't know if I'd remember where I put the list. I have lines. I find them all over the place. I find little slips of paper with an idea, and oh, that's where that went. And yeah,
that's good though. I mean, that's good when you come upon one of them. I have probably about 10 journals right now that are floating around, and I don't know what is in what, but I just start opening them, and it's kind of interesting. So
I do too. I always said if I ever got famous enough for a biographer, they'd go crazy because nothing is chronological. They're all, it's whatever I pick up, and they're all different. Years go by between, decades between what I write. Would you like to read another poem?
Sure. Anything you'd like
Charlottesville is very powerful.
Okay.
Very powerful. I love that.
Thank you. Do you know the oh, here, I got it.
Yeah, 16.
Okay. Okay, although, by the time this came out, so many things had changed, and that's the nature of it. On the anniversary of Charlottesville, cooler today, 81 degrees. There's a storm moving through Alamogordo and Ruidoso. What beautiful swirling in these names: Lupe, Obadiah, Slade. Radio says a tornado hit Eagle Nest north of Taos. Ski country. Hasn't happened in 10 years. Spike Lee's being interviewed wearing a Thank God for Bob Mueller t-shirt, while fire tornadoes slam the West and arsonists are burning people's lives. NFL players kneeling and raising their fists, thank God, on this first anniversary of Charlottesville. State of emergency declared in Virginia. Please don't let anything happen. It's National Lion Day, and the sun will be bloodied tomorrow. The moon in Leo, and how did we thrash back to the 60s race wars, or we never left? Moon opposes Mars, squares Uranus. Solar eclipse in these mountains, headaches for days. I can feel the changes. Spike Lee's Black Klansman releases today. He said until the US owns that it was founded on genocide and slavery, we'll never get better. And the world's in a fire tornado on Highway 60, up from Angel Fire. Deranged air, high winds, flash floods, hail yesterday in the I-25 corridor. In Cibola County, storms moving towards Roswell on its way out of the Milky Way, and even the alien heads on fire.
That is a terrific poem.
Thank you.
Leaves me speechless. How important is it to you to use proper names in places? I notice a lot that you do that.
Yeah, that is really important to me, to have a sense of place, to be specific. But more than that, I think, and this might sound strange, but I think a lot of what I do is related to my being adopted. And I was born in a place called Rosalia Asylum and Maternity Hospital, which also functioned as an orphanage. So I was in that orphanage for the first year of my life. And then I didn't learn my real name until I was in my 30s. So that naming became very important to me, always was. And, finding out who I was, being told, not being told my name, being told a wrong name, all the lies around adoption, so that trying to find an authentic voice in a poem that includes place and name, I feel like is especially important to me as a writer.
Would you like to read that poem about your adoption that's in the book? The one in the book, I don't know if I wrote down the title of that one.
I think I have a couple, let's see. I have one that's called Double Cut. That might be the one you're thinking of. I'll read that one.
Okay.
Let's see. Yeah. So if you would go onto the internet and you could look up these 1950s photos of Rosalia Asylum, and you would see these black and white photos that are kind of bleak. And there's one called the Playroom, and which is not the right name for it, but it has this sort of metal carousel with chipped paint and these, you know, drugged out little babies on it. And that's what this is about. This is called Double Cut. Double cut. I was double cut, once in the womb with a hanger, once when I came out. In the asylum, the hanging bulb of the playground kingdom birthed the hunger in me. Children staring in cast-off tees, the paint-chipped metal carousel with struck, stupid infants strapped in. The golden girl sits in her dirty diaper. She'll grow up a poet, loving suspension. You be the fat black crow, you be the driftwood, you be the poorest kid, dirty face, you be the crying one, you be the no name, strapped in and spinning.